The night my husband told me he was leaving, it was raining in Nashville and our son was asleep upstairs, and the lasagna I'd made from scratch was still warm on the stove, and I remember thinking, in the strange, dissociated calm that arrives just before devastation fully lands, I should put the food away. As though if I could just keep the ordinary things intact, the extraordinary terrible thing might not be entirely real. Welcome back, my wonderful family and friends. I am Mr. Zaha. Thanks for tuning in today. A kind words from a man who has seen it all. Marriage are not mostly bed of roses, sometime you need more of. More of what? Can't say. Continue watching, and you will surely know what to do in situations like this. Kindly hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Tomorrow, I'll be bringing you another exciting story you definitely don't want to miss. So let's get started. There is a specific kind of happiness that doesn't know it's about to end. I've thought about this a great deal in the years since. How the last ordinary Tuesday of a life looks exactly like all the ordinary Tuesdays before it. No shadow preceding it. No premonition, no cinematic musical cue, no change in the quality of light. Just Tuesday. Coffee in the same mug. The same drive down Hillsborough Pike with the same NPR segment half listened to. The same classroom, the same students, the same lunch packed the night before in the same blue insulated bag. And then Wednesday arrives. And everything is different. And Tuesday, that last innocent, ordinary Tuesday, becomes the last landmark of the life you thought you were living. My name is Caroline Marsh. Or it was. For 11 years it was Caroline Marsh. Before that it was Caroline Adler, which is what it became again after everything fell apart. And what it remains today, though I have made a different kind of peace with that name than I had with it at 32. I am 41 now. I teach 6th grade English at Waverly Middle School in Nashville, Tennessee, a job I have held for 14 years and which has saved me in ways that would take longer to enumerate than this story allows. I have one son, Noah. He is 13, dark-haired, serious in the way of children who watched their parents' marriage break apart before they were old enough to have language for it, and resilient in the way of children who are loved fiercely and consistently by at least one person who knows what resilience costs. He plays guitar badly and chess well. He makes me laugh every single day. He is the best thing I have ever done. And his father, James Marsh, is the most complicated relationship I have ever had with the concept of forgiveness. Let me tell you about James and the before. Because there was a before. That's the thing about betrayal that nobody prepares you for. The way it doesn't erase what preceded it, but rather sits beside it permanently, so that for the rest of your life you carry two versions of the same person and have to figure out what to do with both of them. James Marsh, in the before, was the kind of man who made you feel like the room organized itself around him when he walked in. Not with arrogance, not with the performative confidence of a man who needed to be noticed, but with a natural, easy gravity that drew people toward him without apparent effort. He was 6 feet tall, broad through the shoulders, with dark eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled and a laugh that came from somewhere genuine and low. He'd grown up in Franklin, Tennessee, 20 miles south of Nashville. Old Southern family, Sunday dinners, front porches, the kind of upbringing that puts good manners and a certain unhurried grace into a person at a cellular level. He was a structural engineer. The kind of work that requires patience and precision and the ability to look at the weight a thing must bear and design accordingly. I used to think it suited him exactly. This man who seemed, in the before, to understand load-bearing better than anyone I knew. I was wrong about that. About what he could bear. About what he had quietly decided not to. We met at Vanderbilt. He was finishing his master's in civil engineering. I was 2 years into my education degree, and we were introduced at a mutual friend's apartment on a rainy October Friday over bad wine and good conversation. He asked me within the first 20 minutes what I was reading, and when I told him, Mary Lynn Robinson's Gilead, he lit up with the specific delight of a person encountering an unexpected echo of themselves. I've read that 3 times, he said. I keep finding things in it I missed. Reader, I was done for. We dated for 2 years. Married at 27 in a small ceremony at Cheekwood Botanical Garden. 40 people, my mother's flowers from her own garden, James's grandmother's ring on my finger, the whole September afternoon golden and warm and freighted with the best kind of expectation. I can still feel the weight of that day when I let myself. The way certain days have a physical quality, a texture you can return to with your whole body, not just your memory. Noah came when I was 28. That first year was hard in the way that first years with babies are hard. The sleep deprivation, the identity renegotiation, the discovery that love can exist in forms that are simultaneously beautiful and utterly exhausting. James was present through it. Capable. He did the 3 a.m. feeds with a patience I found extraordinary. He read to Noah from the time he was 3 weeks old. Faulkner first, which I objected to on principle, then Goodnight Moon, which Noah preferred anyway. We were good. I need to say that plainly. We were genuinely, substantively good. Which is why when it ended, it didn't just break my heart. It broke my understanding of what I knew. Her name was Tara Simmons. I found out about her the way wives have been finding out about these things since long before the digital age made it simultaneously easier and more brutal. Through the accumulation of small wrongnesses that the body registers before the mind is willing to. The slightly different quality of James's attention when his phone buzzed. The new gym membership he used at hours that didn't align with his stated schedule. The way he began sleeping on his side of the bed with a physical self-containment that was new. Not angry, not cold, just enclosed. Like he was keeping something in. I told myself stories about all of it. Work stress. He'd taken on a large commercial project, a mixed-use development in Germantown that was behind schedule and over budget. Fatigue. The ordinary friction of a marriage in its 9th year. The way love, in long partnerships, changes its texture without changing its substance. I told those stories for 4 months. Then I stopped telling them. I found the messages on a Tuesday evening in March. Noah was 7, asleep upstairs, the lasagna warm on the stove. James was on the back porch with his phone, and I went out to tell him dinner was ready, and I saw the name on his screen before he could angle it away. Tara, I miss you already. Tonight was... He turned the phone face down. We looked at each other across our back porch, in the house we had bought together, in the neighborhood where we knew all our neighbors by name, and Noah had learned to ride his bike on the sidewalk out front. The Nashville spring evening was warm and smelled of cut grass and something blooming. A mockingbird was doing its extravagant thing from the oak at the property line. James looked at me, and I looked at him, and in the 3 seconds before either of us spoke, I felt the life I had known slide 6 inches to the left and become something I did not recognize. How long? I said. He didn't insult me by pretending not to know what I was asking. 8 months, he said. The mockingbird kept singing. I went inside. I turned off the oven. I covered the lasagna with foil. This is the thing from the hook, the moment I keep returning to, the putting away of the ordinary things as though ordinary things could still serve as ballast. Then I sat down at the kitchen table in the house that was our house, and I put my face in my hands. James came inside. He sat across from me. He said things. I know he said things because I remember the sound and rhythm of his voice, the particular cadence of a man trying to explain himself through the wreckage of his own choices. But I could not tell you now what the words were. The words were beside the point. The point was the 8 months. The point was Tara, I miss you already. The point was the 3 a.m. feeds and the Franklin upbringing and Marilyn Robinson's Gilead and Cheekwood Botanical Garden and 40 people and his grandmother's ring. The point was that the man I had built my life around had been living a second life inside the first one, and he had chosen it. I want to be careful here about the next part, about what came after that kitchen table conversation, because it is easy, in retrospect, to draw it in clean lines of villain and victim, and the truth was muddier and more painful than clean lines allow. James did not immediately leave. That is the first complicated thing. There were 3 more weeks of the 2 of us inside our house. Noah between us like an innocent variable in an equation neither of us knew how to solve. James sleeping in the guest room, and coming to breakfast looking like a man being slowly disassembled from the inside. He said he was sorry. Multiple times, in multiple registers. The urgent sorry of immediate guilt, the quieter sorry of a man sitting with the full weight of what he'd done. He said he didn't know what he wanted. He said he was confused. He said that what had happened with Tara had filled something in him he hadn't known was empty, which was the most honest thing he said and also, in its honesty, the most devastating. I asked him once, only once, because asking more than once felt like handing someone a weapon they'd already used. Do you love her? He looked at the guest room window for a long time. I don't know, he said. I think I might. I nodded. Filed it. The way you file things that are too large for immediate processing, carefully, in a place you know you'll have to return to. 3 weeks after I found the messages, on a Sunday evening while Noah was at my mother's house, James sat down across from me in the kitchen again. This man with his dark, crinkled eyes, and his structural engineer's patience, and his Gilead, and his grandmother's ring. This man who had read to our son at 3 a.m., and he told me he was leaving. That he needed to see what this was with Tara. That he was sorry. That he would always be sorry. That he would be present for Noah, financially and physically, every arrangement I wanted. That he hoped one day I could understand. I looked at him across the kitchen table of our house. And I said, very quietly, "I hope it's worth it, James." He left 2 days later. And the rain came down on Hillsborough Pike, and Noah was asleep upstairs, and the lasagna from 3 weeks earlier had long since been thrown away, and I sat in my kitchen alone for the first time as a woman whose husband had chosen someone else. And I did the only thing I could do. I got up. I made coffee. I went upstairs and stood in the doorway of my son's room and watched him sleep. This 7-year-old with his father's dark hair and his own particular face. This person who had no idea yet that his life had just been rearranged. And I felt a love so fierce and so non-negotiable that it functioned, in that moment, as infrastructure. As the thing I would build from. Speech balloon, have you ever had a moment where love for someone became the only ground you had left to stand on? We want to hear your story in the comments. This community shows up for each other. I did not know then what the next 3 years would cost me, or what they would build, or what would arrive on the other side of them. I did not know what James Marsh would become without the life he had dismantled. I did not know that the word forgiveness would one day feel less like a door I needed to open for him, and more like one I needed to open for myself. I only knew the rain, the coffee, the sleeping boy upstairs, and the long, necessary work of what came next. The first year was the hardest. I know that sounds like something you'd find printed on a sympathy card, the kind of card nobody actually knows how to write, so they reach for the nearest true and useless thing. But it was true, and I will say it plainly anyway, because truth doesn't become less true for being common. The first year was the hardest because it was the year of firsts. First Thanksgiving with an empty chair. First Christmas explaining to a 7-year-old why Daddy was spending the holiday somewhere else. First wedding anniversary that passed like an ordinary Thursday, except that I spent 40 minutes sitting on the bathroom floor at 10 o'clock at night not crying, which was somehow worse than crying. The first year was the year of the administrative brutality of divorce. People don't talk about that enough. The paperwork, the lawyers, the meetings in offices with neutral-colored walls where two people who once read Gilead together on a rainy Friday and fell in love divide the inventory of a shared life into columns. Who gets the house? Who gets the retirement accounts? Who carries Noah's health insurance? James was not combative about any of it. That was its own complicated thing, his reasonableness, his cooperation, his quiet acceptance of every arrangement I proposed. It would have been easier, in some ways, if he'd fought, if he'd been ugly about it. Instead, he was present and remorseful and fair, and I had to find a way to be angry at someone who kept apologizing while also moving forward, which is like trying to walk in 2 directions at once. We finalized the divorce in November, 8 months after he left, in a Davidson County courthouse that smelled of industrial cleaner and processed paperwork. I wore a gray blazer and my good boots. I had not cried in front of James since the night he left, and I did not cry that morning either. My attorney, Diane Pierce, a compact, unsentimental woman from Brentwood, who had the energy of someone who had seen every variation of this particular story and had decided to be useful rather than sympathetic, shook my hand afterward and said, "You did well. Go eat something." I went to Frothy Monkey on 12th Avenue and ate a breakfast sandwich alone and looked out the window at the Nashville November Street and thought, okay, this is the first day of the next thing. I was 32 years old, newly divorced, raising a 7-year-old, teaching 6th grade, and I had no idea who I was going to be on the other side of all of it. That not knowing was terrifying. It was also, though I couldn't see it yet, a kind of freedom. My mother, Ruth Adler, was 63 and recently retired from 30 years of nursing at Vanderbilt University Medical Center, a woman built from the same material as load-bearing walls, which is to say she was not soft, but she was strong in ways that mattered more. She lived 12 minutes away in the house I'd grown up in, a brick colonial on Leland Lane with the same kitchen table that had witnessed every significant event of my childhood, and she arrived at my door the morning after James left with a casserole dish and a set expression and absolutely no patience for the suggestion that she shouldn't have come. She didn't say much about James. She didn't need to. My mother was a woman who expressed her feelings through action rather than declaration. She showed up, she fed people, she stayed. She took Noah on Saturdays so I could have the silence I needed. She drove me to the lawyer's office the morning of the divorce and waited in the parking lot with coffee and a thermos and drove me home after without asking me anything I wasn't ready to answer. Once, only once, in the kitchen of the Leland Lane house, 3 months after James left, she said, "You are going to be more than fine, Caroline. You always had more steel in you than you knew. He just never needed you to use it." I have carried that sentence ever since. The other person who saved me was Denise Watkins. Denise had been my closest friend since we taught together at Waverly for 6 years. The kind of friendship that forms when two people discover they are exactly as stubborn, principled, and ridiculous as each other. She taught 7th grade science with the evangelism of a woman who believes fervently that young people understanding how the world works is the most important project there is. She was 38, divorced herself from a man she described simply as a cautionary tale, and raising twin girls named Bree and Jordan with a competence and humor that I found sustaining just to witness. Denise did not handle my situation with delicacy. This was precisely what I needed. "He left you for Tara Simmons?" she said, the morning I told her. We were in her classroom before school, the kind of early morning hour that belongs to teachers and nobody else. "Tara Simmons, who works in his office. You know her?" "I know of her. She was at the Vertex fundraiser last spring." "No, wait. Wrong story. Denise didn't say that. What she said was, I know of her. She came to the school board meeting in September. Dark hair, talked a lot." "That sounds right," I said. Denise was quiet for a moment with the particular quality of a woman deciding between several honest things. "Okay," she said finally. "Here's what we're going to do. We're going to get you through this year. We're going to make sure Noah is okay. And then, not now, but eventually, we're going to figure out who Caroline Adler is when she's not being somebody's wife." She had already, without my asking, started calling me Adler again. I did not fully appreciate, in that moment, the gift of that. Noah handled it the way 7-year-olds handle incomprehensible things, by processing around the edges of it rather than directly through it. He asked questions in small, careful installments, spaced out over weeks, as though he was only able to take in so much at a time and had the wisdom to know it. "Why doesn't Daddy live here?" And then, 2 weeks later, "Does Daddy love someone else?" And then, a month after that, the one that cost me the most to answer, "Did I do something?" I sat down on his bedroom floor with him when he asked that last one, cross-legged on his Star Wars rug, face to face, his dark eyes so like James's and so entirely his own. "Absolutely not," I said. "Not even close to not. None of this has anything to do with you. Not one atom of it. Promise. On everything I have." He nodded, seemed to file it. "Okay. Then, can we have waffles?" "We can absolutely have waffles." We had waffles, and I held together until he was eating, and then I turned to the stove so he wouldn't see my face, and I gripped the counter with both hands and breathed until I was steady again. That was parenting after heartbreak. That was the daily arithmetic of it. You hold together until they're eating. James took Noah every other weekend, as we'd arranged. He had moved into an apartment in East Nashville, a renovated building on Gallatin Avenue, the kind of place that was clearly chosen by someone trying to signal a fresh start rather than purely accommodate a life. He called Noah every evening at 7:30. He was present at every school event, every parent-teacher conference, every one of Noah's Little League games. He and I existing in the careful parallel orbits of co-parents, polite and functional and thoroughly, exhaustingly guarded with each other. I did not ask about Tara. He did not mention her. This arrangement of deliberate silences held for the better part of a year. Then, at Noah's 8th birthday party, held at my mother's house, a Saturday afternoon in June, 14 8-year-olds and a superhero cake, and the specific, joyful chaos of children who have been given sugar and a yard. James arrived with Tara. He had texted me 3 days before. "I'd like to bring someone. Is that okay?" I had stared at that text for a long time. Then I had written back, "It's Noah's day. Whatever's best for him," which was not the same as okay, but it was the most functional answer I could produce. She was, and I record this without drama, as simple observed fact, beautiful. Tara Simmons was 31, slender, with the kind of warm, open face that makes people trust her quickly. She was good with the children at the party. Natural, unperformative. She brought Noah a present she'd clearly thought about, a chess set, because somehow James had told her about the chess, and the thoughtfulness of it landed in my chest like a small, sharp stone. She tried to speak to me. Once, carefully, at the edge of the backyard, while the children were doing cake. She said, "I know this is. I just want you to know I'm not trying to." "Let's not," I said, quietly, evenly. "Not today. It's his birthday." She nodded, retreated. To her credit, she did not try again. I watched James across my mother's backyard, laughing at something one of the kids said, lifting Noah onto his shoulders for a piggyback that made Noah shriek with delight. And I felt the whole, impossible complexity of loving someone and grieving someone and being furious at someone all at the same time, about the same person, in the same body. I did not fall apart. I went inside, stood in my mother's kitchen, and pressed a dish towel to my face for 90 seconds. Then I went back out. The second year was different from the first. Harder in some ways. The acute pain of year one had settled into something more chronic, less sharp, but more pervasive, the way a broken bone settles into a long ache as it heals. But different also in the way that the second year of surviving something is always different from the first, because by then you have evidence. You have gotten through a year. The proof of your own endurance exists, and you can point to it, and it changes what you believe about what you can bear. I started running in the second year. I know, the recently divorced woman who takes up running is a cliché so established it practically has its own font. But here is the thing about clichés. They exist because they work. There is something about putting your body through a physical demand that has nothing to do with sadness and requiring it to perform anyway. That specific negotiation between your will and your legs and the pavement and the Nashville morning. That is genuinely restorative in a way that talking sometimes isn't. I ran Shelby Bottoms Greenway on Tuesday and Thursday mornings at 6 a.m., before Noah woke up, before school, in the particular quality of southern morning light that arrived low and golden through the trees and made even grief look beautiful. I ran with Denise on Saturdays. I ran alone when I needed to think, which was often, and with Denise when I needed someone to talk it while we ran, which was also often. I ran my first half marathon in April of the second year, the country music marathon, crossing the finish line on Broadway in 2 hours and 19 minutes with Denise screaming beside me and my mother holding a sign that said Caroline Adler does not quit in letters large enough to be visible from a considerable distance. Noah, standing beside his grandmother, was holding a smaller sign that said Go MOM with a drawing of a person running that had, generously, 2 legs of notably different lengths. I finished the race and found them in the crowd and crouched down and held my son with my hands still shaking from exertion and my face wet. Not tears exactly, or not only tears, also sweat. Also the physical expression of something that had been looking for a way out for a long time. "You did it," Noah said into my shoulder. "Yeah, Bug," I said. "We did." The third year was the year I started to become someone new. Not a replacement for who I had been. Not a repudiation of the marriage or the love or the Tuesday nights reading and the cheekwood ceremony and all of it. But a version of myself that had been formed, partly, by what had happened, that carried the fracture as part of its structure, the way a bone is sometimes denser at the break point after it heals. I took a graduate course at Belmont University in the fall of the third year, a curriculum development seminar I'd been meaning to take for 2 years and kept deferring. I went back to playing piano, which I'd abandoned in the fog of early parenthood and hadn't returned to. I got a dog, a ridiculous, affectionate golden retriever named Biscuit who Noah named, and who turned out to be exactly as useful for heartbreak as every person who had ever loved a dog had always claimed. I started to laugh again. Not the performing okay laugh, the real one, the one that arrives without being summoned. And somewhere in the architecture of that third year, I began to think about forgiveness. Not as a gift I was being asked to give James, not as a transaction or a performance of virtue, but as a private thing, a question I was asking myself, about what I was still carrying and what it was costing me and whether I wanted to carry it forever. My mother's pastor, Reverend Harold Sims of 15th Avenue Baptist Church, was a man of 70 with the voice of someone who had spent 5 decades believing that human beings were worth the effort. He said something in a Sunday sermon that third year that I've never forgotten. He said, "Forgiveness is not a door you open for someone else. It's a door you open for yourself. The other person may or may not walk through it. But you need the air. I sat in that pew and felt the sentence rearrange something in me. I was not ready to open the door. Not yet. But I had found it. I knew where it was. Have you ever had to find your own door to forgiveness? For someone who hurt you? Or maybe for yourself? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Every story in this community deserves to be heard. I did not respond to James that night. Not immediately. Not in the way he might have expected. Not with the door swinging open at the first knock. Not with the rush of a woman who had been waiting 3 years for exactly this call and had her response pre-prepared and ready. That is not what happened, and I want to be precise about that, because the story of forgiveness that is worth anything is never the one where it comes easily. The easy version is just relief dressed up as grace. What I said, after the long silence and the Nashville rain and biscuit shifting warm against my leg, was this. I hear you, James. I'm not ready to have this conversation tonight. A pause. Okay. I need you to respect that. I do. I will. Another pause, and then, thank you for answering. I hung up and sat for a while without moving. The papers on my lap. The undrunk Chardonnay. The rain doing its patient work against the windows. I thought about the voice on the phone. That unmistakable quality of unsteadiness in a man whose steadiness had always been one of his defining features. The way a crack in a load-bearing wall is more alarming precisely because of what it's supposed to be holding. I thought about what Reverend Sims had said. I thought about the door. Then I picked up my red pen and went back to grading papers, because Noah would be home in 40 minutes and dinner wasn't going to make itself, and the ordinary things, I had learned this thoroughly and at considerable cost, were not obstacles to the important things. They were the infrastructure that held you up while you figured out what to do with the important things. Pasta that night. Biscuit begging shamelessly under the table. Noah telling me about a chess match he'd nearly lost and then hadn't. His hands moving to illustrate the board positions. His face animated with the specific joy of a problem solved under pressure. I listened to every word. I did not tell him about the call. I told Denise the next morning. We were in her car in the Waverly parking lot, 7:45, the kind of early April Nashville morning that can't decide between winter and spring and settles for a complicated negotiation between the two. Bright sun and sharp wind, and the Bradford pear trees along the entrance road, white with blossoms that smelled, as they always did, both beautiful and faintly wrong. Denise listened without interrupting, which was unusual for her, and therefore informative about how seriously she was taking it. When I finished, she looked at the windshield for a moment. How did he sound? She asked. Broken, I said. Actually broken. Not managed. She turned this over. And Tara? Over. 4 months ago, he said. Another silence. I'm not going to tell you what to do, she said finally. Good. But I am going to say one thing. Of course you are. She turned to look at me directly, with the full frontal honesty that was Denise's primary mode of friendship. Whatever you decide, make sure it's for you. Not for Noah, not for the idea of the family you used to have, not because he sounds broken and you have the instinct to fix things. For you. She paused. What do you need from this conversation, if you have it? I sat with that question all day. Through first period and second period and the 40-minute lunch, I spent half of staring at my sandwich. Through the faculty meeting after school and the drive home on Hillsborough Pike and the making of dinner and the supervising of homework and the walking of Biscuit in the blue April evening. What do I need from this conversation? Not closure. I had made my peace, or was making it, without James's participation, because waiting for someone else to provide your closure is a form of ongoing captivity. Not an explanation. I had spent the first year rebuilding the architecture of what happened, and I understood it well enough. The emptiness he had mentioned. The way long marriages can develop slow leaks that neither person addresses until the water is already at your ankles. The way Tara had represented something that felt, in the moment, like the answer to a question he hadn't admitted he was asking. I understood all of that. What I needed, I realized, lying in my bed that night with Biscuit a warm weight at my feet and the April night soft outside my window, was to hear him say the true thing. Not the managed thing, not the apologizer's thing, not the careful, diplomatic language of a man protecting himself while appearing vulnerable. The true thing, whatever it cost him. If he could do that, if James Marsh could finally, after everything, stand in the full unmanaged truth of what he had done and say it plainly, Then I could decide what to do with forgiveness from a place of clarity rather than deficit. I texted him the next morning. Saturday. Coffee. Not a restaurant. I'll come to you. His response came in under a minute. Okay. Thank you, Caroline. He was living in a house now, not the East Nashville apartment of the early years. A small craftsman on Eastland Avenue, the kind of neighborhood that was in the long process of becoming something different from what it had been, full of young families and old-timers, and the particular Nashville mixture of people who had been there forever and people who had arrived recently and were still figuring out what they were to the place. I drove there on Saturday morning while Noah was at my mother's. The April morning had settled into a decision, warm and clear, the kind of day that makes Nashville look like a promise. I had dressed without overthinking it. Jeans, a navy blouse, the low boots I wore when I needed to feel like myself. I had drunk 1 cup of coffee at home, so I wouldn't arrive needing it too badly. I sat in my car in front of his house for 2 minutes before going in. Not because I was afraid. Because I wanted to be deliberate. Because I had learned, in 3 years of rebuilding myself from the ground up, that the moments you walk toward on purpose are different from the moments you stumble into. They carry different weight, they mean different things, and you remember them differently afterward. I am choosing to go in, I thought. Nobody is making me. I am going because I decided this is what I need. Then I got out of the car. James answered the door before I knocked. He had been watching for me, clearly, or perhaps just standing near the front of the house with the restless energy of a man who has been anticipating something for long enough that stillness has become impossible. He looked different from the last time I had really looked at him, which had been at a distance across a soccer field 6 months ago. Thinner. The dark eyes that had crinkled at the corners were still dark, still present, but carrying something heavier than I remembered. His hair had more gray in it. He was wearing a plain gray Henley and jeans. No performance in it. No effort to present well. Just a man, in his house, on a Saturday morning, trying to be honest. Caroline, he said. James. He stepped back to let me in. The house was modest and clean and had the quality of a space that had been lived in functionally rather than lovingly. Furniture that served its purpose without announcing anything. Walls with a few framed photos. A kitchen that smelled of the coffee he'd made. On the dining table, I noticed a yellow legal pad with handwriting on it. Notes, or the beginning of something. He saw me notice it and moved to turn it over. Don't, I said. He left it face up. We sat at the kitchen table, this small echo of all the kitchen tables that had been the staging ground for the significant exchanges of our shared life. And I felt the weight of that, the way our history kept insisting on these geometric repetitions. And he poured coffee into 2 mugs without asking how I took mine. Because after 11 years of marriage, some things persist beyond the dissolution of every formal arrangement. He sat across from me, and I looked at him and said, Tell me the true thing, James. Whatever it is. I'm not here for the managed version. He looked at his coffee mug, and then he told me. It took the better part of an hour. Not because he was evasive, the opposite. Because the true thing, when you commit to telling it, takes time. It has layers and tributaries and the unexpected digressions of genuine self-examination rather than the clean through lines of a prepared account. He told me about the year before Tara, about a creeping dissatisfaction that he had never named to me, never named to himself with any honesty, a feeling of having arrived somewhere and found that arrival felt less like completion than like enclosure. He said it carefully, watching my face, making sure I understood that he was not assigning this feeling to me or to our marriage as a flaw in those things, but locating it accurately in himself, in his own unexamined architecture, in the places he had never let anyone look. I should have told you, he said, that I was feeling that way. I should have said it out loud, and we should have dealt with it together. Instead he stopped. Instead I found someone who didn't know the enclosure yet. And I told myself that meant something, that it was information about what I needed. And was it? I asked, quietly. He looked at me. No, it was just novelty, which is a completely different thing that I was not mature enough, at the time, to distinguish. I absorbed that. Tell me about Tara, I said. The real version. A pause. You sure? I asked. He told me. 3 years of it. The early intensity that it felt, he said, like proof of something, but was actually just the temporary brightness of a thing that doesn't yet know what it costs to endure. The gradual revelation of incompatibilities, not dramatic, not ugly, Just the slow discovery that what had seemed like depth was partly the unknown filling itself with projection. Tara had wanted children. James had Noah and had been honest that he wasn't sure about more. Tara had wanted to relocate, a job offer in Atlanta that she'd wanted James to follow her for. James had not gone. Why not? I asked. The answer was immediate and unguarded. Noah, he said. I wasn't leaving Nashville. I wasn't leaving my son. I nodded. And when it ended? I asked. He looked at the yellow legal pad on the table, at the handwriting on it, which I could now see, from my angle, was not notes but something more personal. The beginning of a letter, maybe, or the working out of something in the only way James had ever been able to work things out, which was by writing them down. When it ended, he said, I sat in this house for about 2 weeks doing very little. And then I started looking at things, at what I'd done, at what I'd had and his voice did something. He controlled it. I called my dad. First real conversation we'd had in about a year. I called my brother in Memphis. I went to see Reverend. I went to church, actually, for the first time in a long time. I looked at him. Which church? A pause. Something shifted in his expression. 15th Avenue Baptist, he said. I know it's your church. I went on a Sunday when I was sure you wouldn't be there. But I needed, he stopped again. Reverend Sims preached about forgiveness. About a door. The kitchen was very still. I was there that Sunday, I said. I just sat in the back. James looked at me across the table. And for a moment, just a moment, the 3 years and the divorce and the lasagna on the stove and Tara's warm open face at Noah's birthday party and all the parking lot handoffs and the running medals and biscuit and the 2.5 hours on bathroom floors not crying. All of it was present in the room at once. The whole enormous complicated catalog of what one person's choice had set in motion. Caroline, he said, and his voice was completely unmanaged now. Raw in the way that things are raw when all the protective layers have finally been removed. I need to tell you that I am sorry. Not sorry like I've been saying it. Sorry like I understand what I actually did. What I took from you. Not just the marriage or the family or the stability. What I took from your belief in yourself. In your own judgment. The way you looked at everything after and wondered what you'd missed, what you'd done wrong, whether you'd been enough. His jaw worked. You were enough. You were more than enough. The failure was entirely mine, and I spent 3 years letting you carry the weight of my failure as though it were shared, and it wasn't. It was mine. I sat with that for a long time. Outside, through his kitchen window, the Eastland Avenue Bradford pears were blossoming in the April light. That complicated, beautiful, faintly wrong smell drifting through the window he'd cracked open. I know it was yours, I said finally. I've known that for a while. I know you know. I needed you to hear me say it. Yes, I said. You did. We sat in the kitchen quiet. Not the kitchen quiet of our old house. Not the quiet of a shared life in mid-motion. The comfortable ambient silence of two people who have been in the same rooms long enough that silence is its own conversation. This was a different quiet. The quiet of two people who have been through something enormous and are sitting on the other side of it, checking the damage, assessing what remains. I'm not ready to forgive you today, I said. I want you to know that's not the same as saying I won't. It means I'm taking it seriously enough to not do it quickly. He nodded. That's fair. It's not about fair. It's about what's real. I looked at him directly. I've been doing a lot of work, James. On myself. On what the last 3 years cost me and built in me. I'm not going to undo that work by rushing toward a feeling I haven't actually arrived at yet. I understand. And whatever happens between us, or doesn't, Noah comes first. Always. That's non-negotiable, and it has never been in question, but I'm saying it clearly so we're standing on the same ground. Agreed. Always. I stood up, picked up my bag. At the door I turned. James was still at the table, both hands around his coffee mug, looking like a man who had just handed something over and was learning how to sit with his own empty hands. The letter on the table, I said. Is it for me? A long pause. Yes. I'm not ready to read it today. I know. Leave it, I said. I'll let you know. I walked out into the April morning, the warm sun and the Bradford pears and the Nashville street going about its ordinary Saturday business. And I sat in my car and I breathed. And I felt, for the first time in 3 years, the specific sensation of a door I had located finally becoming something I could, in my own time, on my own terms, choose to open. Have you ever been handed an apology that finally felt real, after a long time of ones that didn't? What made the difference? Tell us in the comments below. Not yet, but soon. On my terms. In my time. Because that, I had learned, was what made forgiveness real rather than performed. The choosing of it. Deliberately. With open eyes. I did not go back for the letter for 11 days. 11 days of ordinary life moving over and around the extraordinary thing. The way I had learned, by now, that ordinary life always moves, regardless of what is happening underneath it. School. Papers. Biscuit. Noah's chess tournament at Hillwood High School on the second Saturday, where he placed third and accepted his bronze ribbon with the measured composure of a 13-year-old who had decided that visible disappointment was beneath him, and then ate an entire order of Hattie B's hot chicken on the way home and talked about every match in precise, animated detail and was entirely, beautifully himself. I watched him across the restaurant table. This boy, this particular configuration of James and me and his own entirely original personhood, and felt the specific love that has no adequate language. The kind that doesn't ask anything of you except to be present for it. Dad texted, Noah said between bites. Casual. The studied casualness of a 13-year-old who has learned that the way you introduce a topic determines how much room you get to explore it. Oh yeah. Said you guys talked. Last week. He looked at his chicken. He didn't say about what. No, I said. He wouldn't. Noah chewed. Considered. Are you guys, is something happening? I looked at my son across the table. At the dark eyes that were James's and the set of the jaw that was mine, and the person underneath both of those things who was entirely his own. I thought about all the times in the last 3 years I had held things together in front of him, had turned to the stove so he wouldn't see my face, had answered his careful questions with the most honest age-appropriate truth I could construct. He was 13 now. The age-appropriate truth had more room in it. Your dad asked to talk to me, I said, about some things that needed saying. Between us. Adult things. About the divorce? About some of what happened. Yes. He was quiet for a moment. Outside the restaurant window, Nashville went about its Saturday evening. The particular energy of the city at the turn of spring, warm and lit and full of itself. Is it? Are you okay? He asked. Yes, I said. More than okay, actually. He studied me with those sharp eyes. Seemed to find what he was looking for. Good, he said. Then, returning to his chicken, he's been different lately. Dad. Better different. Different how? I don't know. More, present. Like he's actually in the room instead of just physically there. He paused, with the unconscious precision of a child who has been paying careful attention for a very long time. He cried at my game last month. The regional one. When I won the semifinal. He thought I didn't see, but I did. I set down my fork. He cried. Yeah. Noah shrugged. As though this were ordinary. As though fathers crying at chess tournaments were a known and unremarkable phenomenon. I think he knows he missed stuff. When I was little. A pause. I think he's trying to make it count now. I looked at my son for a long moment. At this 13-year-old who had watched his parents' marriage fracture before he had language for it. Who had asked did I do something on a Star Wars rug at age 7 and accepted my answer with a trust that still humbled me. Who had grown into someone of such quiet perceptiveness that he could read the emotional weather of the people he loved and report it back with more accuracy than most adults managed. You're pretty remarkable, you know that? I said. He gave me the look that 13-year-olds give their mothers when they say things like this. Mom, I'm serious. Can we get banana pudding? We got banana pudding. And on the drive home, while Noah had his earbuds in and the Nashville night moved past the windows, I thought about what he'd said. About presence. About trying to make it count. About a man crying at a chess tournament because he knew he had missed things and was trying, in whatever way was available to him now, to be there for what remained. I went back for the letter on a Thursday evening. Noah was at my mother's, a standing Thursday arrangement that had started as practical necessity in the divorce year and had calcified into cherished ritual, grandmother and grandson with their dinner and their card games and their particular companionship. I had the house to myself, which was not the solitude of loneliness. I had long since made peace with solitude, but the solitude of choice, of a woman who has furnished her own life and knows where everything is. I drove to Eastland Avenue in the blue April evening, the city settling into the particular quiet of a weeknight, the Bradford pears past their peak blossoming now and moving toward the ordinary green of May. I had texted James at 4, I'm coming for the letter tonight. You don't need to be there. His response, okay, I'll leave it on the porch. And he had, in a plain white envelope, my name on the front in his handwriting. The architectural handwriting of an engineer, precise and clear, Caroline in block letters that somehow managed to look both deliberate and vulnerable. I picked it up off the porch railing without stopping, got back in my car, and drove to Shelby Park. I sat at a picnic table near the water as the evening light went copper and long across the lake, and I opened the envelope. I am not going to reproduce the letter in full. Some things belong to the people they were written for and to no one else, and that letter is one of them. What I will tell you is what it contained, in its essential architecture, because James had written it the way he did everything that mattered to him, with structural care and emotional precision and the willingness to look at a thing from every angle before committing it to the page. He had written about the night he left, about sitting in that East Nashville apartment the first night and feeling not the liberation he had expected, but a specific, terrible clarity. The clarity of a man who has made an irreversible choice and is only now, in the silence of its aftermath, understanding its full dimensions. He had written about watching me, over 3 years of parking lots and sidelines and school events, watching me become someone. Not someone new, exactly, but someone more fully realized. Someone who ran half marathons and played piano and had a ridiculous dog and laughed in a way he hadn't heard since our early years. He wrote that watching that happen, from the outside, from the position of the person who had forced me onto that path by removing the life I'd organized around, was one of the more complicated experiences of his adult existence. He wrote about Noah, about the chess tournaments and the guitar playing and the particular quality of their Thursday evenings together, how his son had become, in the years since the divorce, both more known to him and more illuminating of everything he had failed to prioritize when he had the chance to do it differently. He wrote about Tara, briefly, with neither bitterness nor romanticism, that it had been real, in the way that many things are real without being right, that it had run its course not dramatically but quietly, the way things end when they were built on foundations that couldn't hold weight, that when it ended he had not been surprised, and that the absence of surprise had told him something important about what he had actually known, even then. And then, at the end of the letter, in handwriting that was slightly less architectural than the rest of it, slightly less controlled, the handwriting of a man riding past his own defenses, he wrote this. I don't know what I'm asking for, Caroline. I want to be honest about that. I'm not writing this because I have a clear request or a defined hope at the end of it. I'm writing it because I owe you the true accounting. I chose wrong. I chose wrong in a way that changed the trajectory of your life and Noah's life, and I have to live with that, and I am living with it, and I'm not asking you to make that easier for me. What I want, if I'm permitted to want something, is for you to know that the man who sat across from you at Cheekwood with his grandmother's ring and his whole heart was real. That man was not a fiction. He got lost for a while in something he shouldn't have followed, and he found his way back too late to repair what he'd broken, but he was real. And if there is any version of the future in which you can look at me without only seeing the worst thing I did, I would like to try to be worth that. Not immediately. Not on any timeline except yours. Just, if there's a door, I'll wait outside it for as long as you need. I love you. I have always loved you. I understand completely if that information is useless to you at this point. I just needed you to have it. James. I sat at the picnic table in Shelby Park for a long time after I finished reading. The copper light had gone purple-blue, the first stars arriving in the Tennessee sky with the tentative quality of things not yet sure of their welcome. Across the water, 2 Canada geese moved in their unhurried way. Somewhere behind me in the park, a child was calling to someone in the particular voice of a child who is not yet worried about being heard. I read the letter twice, then a third time, and I felt, what did I feel? Not the rush of romantic feeling I might have felt at 32, reading those words on the heels of the wound. The wound was not fresh anymore. It had become part of the landscape, the way scars become part of a body, present, informative, no longer the emergency they once were. What I felt was something quieter and more complex. The recognition of truth in his words. Not performed truth, not strategic truth, but the real kind. The kind that has the specific texture of a person who has finally stopped managing themselves. The grief of what had been lost, not with the acute edge of year one, but with the settled, clear-eyed ache of someone who has fully metabolized a loss and knows its exact dimensions. And underneath all of it, something that had been moving toward the surface for weeks now, patient and certain as a season changing. Compassion, not the compassion of weakness, not the compassion that papers over injury with sentiment. The hard kind, the kind that looks at a person who has failed you specifically at great cost, and sees, alongside the failure, the human being who committed it, the fear underneath the choice, the emptiness that preceded it, the long, costly education of consequence. The boy from Franklin, Tennessee, who had grown up believing that arrivals were the point, only to discover that the life you build after the arrival is the entire thing, and that he had walked away from his in search of a feeling he could have found, if he'd been brave enough, by simply turning to face what he had. I folded the letter, put it back in the envelope, sat for another few minutes with the darkening park around me and the geese on the water and the child's voice behind me fading as they were called toward wherever home was. Then I took out my phone. I didn't call James. I called my mother. "Mama," I said when she answered. Caroline. Her voice. This voice I had known my whole life. The voice that had said you have more steel in you than you knew. Shifted immediately into the register she reserved for the moments that mattered. "What is it?" "I think I'm ready," I said. "To forgive him. Not because he deserves it, or not only because of that. Because I need the air." A pause. I could hear, in the background, the faint sound of Noah and whatever card game they were playing. His voice asking a question, her voice answering, the small warm sounds of a Thursday evening in the Leland Lane house. "How does it feel?" she asked. I considered it honestly. "Like something setting down," I said. "Like I've been carrying it a long way, and I've finally gotten where I was going." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "You know forgiveness isn't a door you only open once." "I know. You're going to have to keep choosing it. On the days it's hard." "I know that too. And whatever you decide about James, about whether this goes anywhere beyond forgiveness, that's a separate door. Don't confuse them." "I won't." I looked at the last of the light on the water. "I love you, Mama." "I love you too, baby. You want to talk to Noah?" "Yeah," I said. "Put him on." His voice arrived, warm and immediate. "Mom? You okay?" "More than okay," I said. "I just called to hear your voice." A pause. "That's kind of weird." "Probably. But okay," he said. And I could hear, underneath the 13-year-old effect, the small smile that was entirely his own. "I'm here." "I know you are," I said. "That's the whole thing." 2 days later, on a Saturday morning, I called James. He answered on the second ring, with the voice of a man who had been awake for a while, possibly the voice of a man who had not been sleeping particularly well for 11 days. "Caroline." I read the letter, I said. A pause. "Okay. I want to meet. Not at your house, not at a restaurant. Somewhere neutral." I paused. "Centennial Park. By the Parthenon. 10 o'clock. A longer pause. "I'll be there." Centennial Park on a Saturday morning in late April is one of Nashville's unreasonable gifts to itself. The great green expanse of it, the replica Parthenon rising improbable and magnificent against the Tennessee sky, the families and joggers and dogs, and the lake with its ducks, and the enormous, unhurried sense of a city giving its people somewhere to simply be. I arrived at 9:55. James was already there. He was standing near the Parthenon steps, hands in the pockets of a dark jacket, looking out at the park with the particular quality of a man doing his best to be still and not quite succeeding. He turned when he heard me coming, and I watched his face move through several things in quick succession, hope and uncertainty and the careful containment of both. "Hi," he said. "Hi." We fell into step beside each other, neither of us directing it, just the natural motion of two people who had walked beside each other for 11 years. Around the Parthenon, onto the path that circled the lake. The morning around us bright and ordinary and full of its own business. We walked in silence for a while. Then I said, "I read the letter 3 times. "I know it was a lot," he said. I wasn't sure. "It was right," I said. "Everything in it was right. Not just what you said, the way you said it. Without managing it." He looked at the path. "I've been in therapy," he said. "For about 6 months. Dr. Angela Reeves, over on West End. I should have told you that. It's relevant. What made you start?" He was quiet for a moment. "Noah, actually. Something he said to me, about 3 months after Tara and I ended. He said," he paused, and I saw his throat move. He said, "Dad, are you happy?" And I said, "Of course I am, why?" And he said, "Because you seem like you're just getting through things instead of actually living them." He was 12 years old. I closed my eyes briefly. "That's Noah." "I know." A pause. I sat in my car after I dropped him off, and I finally stopped arguing with what I knew. And I called Angela. He glanced at me. "She's helped me look at a lot of things, including what I've been doing with my own pain, the pre-terror stuff, the emptiness I mentioned, where it actually came from. And where did it come from?" A long pause. The lake beside us, the ducks, the distant laughter of children. "Me," he said simply. "It came from me. From things I'd never dealt with, about my dad, about some of the ways I was raised to believe that achievement was the same as fulfillment, that arriving somewhere was the same as being somewhere. I confused those things for a long time." He paused. "And instead of doing the work of figuring that out, I looked for someone who didn't know yet that I hadn't. I absorbed that." "That's honest," I said. "Angela's been very firm about honest," he said, with the ghost of something that was almost the old James, the self-deprecating half-smile, the lightness that had always coexisted with his seriousness. We walked another half-circuit of the lake in silence. Then I stopped. James stopped beside me. We were at the water's edge, the Parthenon reflected imperfectly in the lake's surface, the real thing and its mirror image existing together in the same moment, neither one more true than the other. "I forgive you, James," I said. The words were quiet, deliberate, the most considered 2 sentences I had spoken in 3 years. He turned to look at me. His eyes were doing something he wasn't trying to prevent. "Not because it's behind us," I continued. "Because it isn't, not entirely. Not because the last 3 years didn't happen or didn't cost what they cost. But because I've been carrying something that's been mine to put down for a while now, and I'm choosing to put it down." I held his gaze. "This is for me as much as it's for you. I need you to understand that." "I do," he said. His voice was rough. "I understand. And it doesn't mean," I paused. "It doesn't tell us what comes next. I don't know what comes next. I know I'm not ready to. I need time. To see who you are now. To see if this is consistent, not just a feeling you're having in a hard season." "That's fair," he said. "It's not about fair," I said, the same words I had said at his kitchen table 2 weeks ago. "It's about what's real." He looked at me for a long moment. The morning light on the water, the Parthenon behind us, ancient and rebuilt, and standing anyway. "Can I say something?" he asked. "Yes." "Thank you," he said. "Not just for this, for today, for the last 3 years, for the way you raised Noah, for the person you've become, and for the grace it took to become her after what I did." His voice broke slightly on the last words. He steadied it. "You deserved better than what I gave you. And you went out and built it for yourself anyway. He stopped. "That's extraordinary, Caroline." I looked at the water for a moment. Sometimes the most powerful thing someone can do is acknowledge not just what they did wrong, but what you built from the wreckage of it. Has someone ever seen your strength in a way that changed something? Tell us in the comments. "I know," I said. And for the first time, the very first time, I smiled at James Marsh. Not the polite smile of co-parenting logistics. Not the careful, neutral expression of managed civility. The real one. Small and unguarded and complicated and entirely genuine. He smiled back. And the Nashville morning held both of us. The water and the Parthenon and the ducks and the ordinary Saturday brightness. In the patient, generous way that cities hold the private moments of the people who live inside them. Never commenting, always witnessing. "Walk a little longer?" I said. "Yeah," he said. "I'd like that." We walked. The summer came the way Tennessee summers always come. Not gradually, not with the polite incremental warming of more temperate places, but all at once, like a decision. One week it was April and the Bradford pears were doing their complicated thing. And then it was June and the heat was a physical presence on every street corner, and the humidity turned the air into something you wore rather than breathed, and Nashville settled into the particular lush, slow-moving rhythm of a southern summer that has been exactly this way for 200 years and intends to continue. I had always loved it. Even in the hard years. Even in the year 1 February that had felt like it would never end. Even in the second year when some days the weight of everything was so pervasive it had a climate of its own. I had loved the Tennessee summer. The way it made everything abundant. The fireflies in the backyard at dusk. The way the heat slowed things down to a pace that required you to be present in your body, in your specific location on the earth, in the actual moment rather than the anticipated or remembered one. That summer, The summer after the letter, after Centennial Park, after forgiveness, felt different from the ones that had preceded it. Not easier exactly, or not only easier, more inhabited. Like a house that has been opened up after a long winter, windows raised, light coming in from angles that had been closed off. James and I did not rush anything. I want to be precise about this because I think the rushing is where people go wrong, where the relief of reconciliation gets confused with the work of it, where the feeling of resolution gets mistaken for the thing itself. Resolution is not a feeling. It's a practice. It's what you do on the Tuesday mornings when the feeling isn't there, and you do it anyway because you have decided, with your whole considered self, that the doing matters more than the feeling in any given moment. What we did, that summer, was this. We had coffee. Once a week, sometimes twice, at Frothy Monkey on 12th Avenue. The same place I had eaten a breakfast sandwich alone on the morning my divorce was finalized, which I recognized as either ironic or fitting and decided, after some consideration, was both. We sat across from each other in the particular coffee shop light of late morning, and we talked. Not about the past, not primarily. We had done the past. The past had been excavated and examined and grieved and accounted for, and returning to it constantly would have been a form of punishment rather than reconciliation. We talked about now. About his work, a new project, a pedestrian bridge over the Cumberland River that he described with the specific animation of a man who loves what he does, whose eyes change quality when he talks about load distribution and structural integrity, and the particular engineering challenge of building something that has to be both functional and beautiful. I listened to him talk about it and felt, for the first time in years, something other than the guarded distance I had maintained, felt genuine interest, the natural curiosity of a person who cares about another person's inner life. I talked about my students, about a boy named Marcus in my third period class who had arrived in September barely reading at grade level, and by May was writing essays that made me sit up straight, the particular joy of watching a mind discover itself that never gets old, that had sustained me through everything. James listened the way he had always listened at his best, with his whole attention, asking real questions, remembering details from week to week. We talked about Noah. That was the easiest territory and also the most revealing, because the way two people talk about their shared child tells you everything about who they are to each other, whether the child is a buffer or a bridge, whether the talking is performance or genuine. With James and me, that summer, it was genuine. We compared notes. We laughed about the same things. We worried about the same things, the increasing amount of time Noah spent in his own head, the way he internalized pressure before releasing it, the guitar playing that was still technically terrible and emotionally expressive in equal measure. One morning in July, James showed me a video on his phone, Noah at a recent Thursday evening, playing guitar in James's living room, not knowing he was being filmed. The playing was as technically imperfect as advertised, but the song was one he'd written himself, and the lyrics were. They were about distance and return, about the space between people who love each other and what crosses it. Written with the unguarded honesty of a 13-year-old who doesn't yet know that most adults spend their whole lives trying to recover that honesty after learning to be careful. I watched the video twice. Then I looked at James across the coffee shop table. "He's going to be okay," I said. "He's already okay," James said. "He got that from you." I shook my head. "He got it from both of us. The parts that work, at least." James looked at me. Something in his expression settled, the specific settling of a man receiving something he had not been sure he was allowed to hope for. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Maybe so." My mother watched all of it with the careful, non-interventionist attention of a woman who has been a nurse for 30 years and understands that the most important thing you can do for a healing process is stay out of its way while remaining available. She did not offer opinions. She did not ask leading questions. She made casseroles and let me talk when I needed to and was quiet when I needed that instead. And once, in her kitchen on a Sunday afternoon in August, while we were doing dishes together after dinner, she said simply, "You seem like yourself again." I thought about that, about what herself meant, whether it was the Caroline before the leaving, the Caroline of Cheekwood and the kitchen table and the before. Whether returning to yourself after something like this meant returning to who you were, or whether it meant arriving at who you were always supposed to become, using the hard thing as the passage. "I think I'm more myself than I've ever been," I said. She handed me a dish to dry. "Good," she said. "That's better." Denise, characteristically, was more direct. We were running Shelby Bottoms on a Saturday morning in August. The kind of Nashville August morning that is already 80 degrees at 7 a.m. and fully committed to getting worse, when she said, without preamble, without breaking stride, "Are you falling back in love with him?" I ran for a few steps before answering. "I don't know," I said. "I don't think that's the right question yet." "What's the right question?" "Whether I trust him." I considered it as I ran. The way running had always helped me think, the physical demand clearing space for the mental work. And I think I'm beginning to. Cautiously, with full awareness of what trust cost me last time. "That's very measured," Denise said. "I'm a very measured person." "You absolutely are not." She glanced at me sideways. "You're a person who feels things enormously and has learned to move carefully because of it. Those are different things." I ran another quarter mile thinking about that. "He's different," I said finally. "Not performing different. Actually different. The therapy, I can hear it in how he talks. He's looking at himself. Really looking. People can do therapy and still be exactly who they were," Denise said. Not skeptically, accurately. "I know. But there's a version of it where something actually shifts. Where the looking changes the thing being looked at." I paused. "I think that's what's happening with him." "And what about you?" she asked. "What do you want, Caroline? Not what's fair or what's right or what's best for Noah. What do you want?" The question landed the way real questions land. Not with immediate answers, but with the sense of something large being moved aside to reveal what was underneath it. I ran with it for half a mile. "I want to find out if what we were is still in there somewhere," I said. "Under everything that happened. I want to know if it survived." Denise was quiet for a moment. Then, "That's not measured at all." "No," I agreed. "It isn't." She smiled, the big laugh-adjacent smile. "Good," she said. "I was getting worried about you." The moment that changed everything. The moment I look back at now as the one that moved us from the careful, tentative territory of coffee and conversations into something that had a different name, happened not between James and me, but because of Noah. It was a Friday evening in late September. The school year had started, the summer heat had finally, gratefully released its hold, and Nashville was doing its best October impression 2 weeks early, clear and cool and golden, the kind of evening that makes you want to be outside in it rather than doing anything in particular. Noah had a guitar recital. Not a formal recital. His teacher, Ms. Pam Greer, ran a community music program out of a converted space on Nolensville Road, and twice a year, she held an informal showcase where her students played for whoever came. No stage, no spotlight. Just folding chairs arranged in a semicircle and students sitting on stools and playing for an audience of parents and siblings and neighbors who came because they wanted to rather than because they were required to. I had told James about it 3 weeks prior, in one of our coffee mornings. He had asked if he could come. Not just as Noah's father. That was assumed. That was always assumed. But whether he could come with me. Arrive together, sit together, leave together. I had thought about it for 2 days. Then I had said yes. We arrived at the same time, his car pulling into the Nolensville Road parking lot just as I did, as though we had coordinated it without meaning to. He got out of his car, and I got out of mine, and we stood for a moment in the parking lot in the September evening, both aware of the slight formality of the occasion, not the recital, but this. The first time in 3.5 years that we had arrived somewhere together, as something that was not purely co-parenting logistics. He was wearing a navy jacket over a simple white shirt. He looked like himself, the good version, the real version. He looked like the man in the letter. "Hi," he said. "Hi." We walked inside. Noah saw us from across the room, saw us together, standing side by side, and something moved across his 13-year-old face that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. Not surprise exactly, because Noah had been paying careful attention all summer, in his quiet, precise way, and I suspected he had seen what was developing before either of us had named it. What moved across his face was something that looked very much like the careful, considered smile of someone receiving information they had hoped for, but had been too wise to count on. He raised one hand in a brief wave. We waved back. Then he went back to talking to the kid beside him, because he was 13 and the social geometry of the room required his attention, and because, and this was pure Noah, he understood instinctively that the moment didn't need to be made much of to mean everything. He played third in the program. The song he chose was the one from the video, the one James had shown me on his phone in July. The one about distance and return and the space between people who love each other and what crosses it. He had reworked it since the video. The guitar playing was still imperfect. Technically, he was never going to be a musician in any professional sense, and I suspected he knew it and didn't particularly care, but the song itself had deepened. The lyrics had been refined in the way that a 13-year-old refines something when they return to it with more life than they had before. He played it simply, sitting on the stool with his dark head bent over the guitar, and the room was quiet with the particular quality of a room listening to something honest. Halfway through the second verse, James reached over in the folding chair beside me and took my hand. Not dramatically, not with the declarative weight of a gesture being made. Just the way you reach for something familiar, something that your hand knows the shape of, something that has always been, in some cellular way, where your hand belongs. I looked down at our joined hands. Then I looked at my son on the stool, singing about distance and return, and I felt the complicated, enormous, unnameable thing that was not happiness exactly, though it contained happiness, and was not forgiveness exactly, though it contained that too, and was not love exactly, though God, it contained that most of all. It was something more like wholeness. The thing that happens when the broken places have finally been attended to, not hidden, not papered over, but actually tended, actually healed, the way a good doctor tends a wound. And you discover that the healed version is not lesser than the original, but different. Stronger at the fracture points. More honest about its own structure. I did not pull my hand away. After the recital, in the parking lot, Noah stood between us with his guitar case and the bronze ribbon composure and said, "So, are you guys like, is this a thing now?" James and I looked at each other. "We're figuring it out," I said. "That usually means yes," Noah said. "It means we're figuring it out," I said. He considered this with great seriousness. Then, "Okay, but can we get ice cream while you figure it out? Because I played well, and I feel like that deserves ice cream." James laughed, the real laugh, the genuine one, the one I had not heard aimed at me in 3.5 years. "You played great, Bug," I said. "I know," Noah said, with perfect equanimity. Ice cream, James confirmed. We went to Jenny's Splendid Ice Creams on 8th Avenue. The three of us, on a Friday evening in late September, the Nashville night warm and clear around us. Noah talking about his recital and the chess team's upcoming season and a book he was reading for school that he had unexpectedly decided he liked. James and I walked beside each other on the sidewalk, not holding hands. That was for later, for the private moments, not yet for the public ones. But close. The way people walk when they have decided, without quite saying it yet, that the distance between them is something they are choosing to close. That was 6 months ago. I am writing this now. These words, this whole long accounting of everything. In the kitchen of the Leland Lane house, which is my mother's house, where I grew up, where I spent countless Sunday afternoons in the years of rebuilding. My mother is in the garden. Biscuit is asleep under the table with the commitment of a dog who has found his exact location in the universe and intends to remain there. It is March. Almost exactly 3 years to the month from the night James Marsh sat across from me at our kitchen table and told me he was leaving. 3 years is a long time. It is also, in certain configurations, not long at all. James and I are not remarried. I want to be clear about that. Not because remarriage is impossible or foreclosed, but because this is not that story yet. We are something that does not have a clean category, which used to bother me and no longer does, because I have learned that the insistence on clean categories is often just fear wearing the costume of order. We are together. We are building something, carefully, honestly, with the full knowledge of what building costs and what happens when the foundations aren't right, and the full commitment to getting the foundations right this time. We see each other several evenings a week. We have dinner with Noah, the three of us, on Thursdays, the day that used to be my Mother's Day with Noah, which she surrendered with the gracious efficiency of a woman who knows when her work is done. James has continued with Dr. Reeves. I have continued, intermittently, with my own therapist, a quiet, perceptive woman named Dr. Sylvia Park in Green Hills who I started seeing in year 2 and who has been, in her understated way, as formative as the running and the piano and the dog and all of it. We have had hard conversations. We will have more. There are days when the old wound announces itself, when something James does or says carries the faint echo of the person he was before the reckoning, and I have to decide, in that moment, whether I am seeing a genuine regression or the ordinary imperfection of a person who is trying and sometimes fails at trying. Usually it is the second thing. On the days it isn't, I say so, clearly, without softening. This is the new contract, the one we did not have before, the one that might have saved us the hard way if we'd had it earlier. He hears me, always. He doesn't defend first and feel later. He reverses that order. Now, that is not a small thing. That is the whole thing, actually. The ability to be told something true about yourself and stay in the room with it, stay open to it. Let it do its work rather than reflexively building a wall against it. Dr. Webb taught him that. I believe Dr. Webb may have saved my marriage. The marriage that wasn't yet a marriage again when the saving happened, which is the kind of thing that makes you believe in the patience of grace, the way the right help, applied at the right moment, works backward and forward simultaneously. Noah turned 14 in June. He is taller now. James's height is arriving in him incrementally, which Noah tracks with the fascination of a scientist observing a known but still interesting experiment. He is quieter than he was as a small child and more himself than he has ever been. The chess and the guitar and the particular interior life of a boy who processes the world deeply and releases it selectively, in chosen moments, to chosen people. He knows that his parents love each other. He has never said this directly. That is not his style, the direct naming of emotional facts about other people. But he knows. You can see it in the way he moves through the Thursday evenings, the way he occasionally says something to James that is clearly meant for my ears, the way he catches us looking at each other and permits himself the smallest possible smile before returning to whatever he was doing. He is fine. More than fine. He is proof, the most important and unconditional proof, that children do not need their parents to be perfect. They need them to be honest and present and willing to repair what breaks. They need to be shown that things can be broken and mended, and that the mended version is worth having. That is what we are showing him. I think about that a great deal, about what it means to demonstrate to a child, with your actual life rather than your stated intentions, that love is not canceled by failure, that forgiveness is not the same as forgetting, that two people can make the worst mistake of their shared life and choose, with full knowledge and open eyes, to find out if something real remains. Something real remains. I am certain of that now. Last week, James and I walked Shelby Bottoms in the early March evening, the light going long and gold, the greenway beginning its slow return to the green. It goes away from every fall and comes back to every spring, the river visible between the trees and silver in the late light. We had been talking about nothing in particular, the pedestrian bridge project, nearly complete now, a book I was teaching, Biscuit's latest act of domestic chaos, and we fell into one of those silences that good company makes comfortable rather than awkward. Then James said, without preamble, with the directness that had become more characteristic of him in the past months, I want to ask you something. Okay, I said. Are you happy? I looked at the river through the trees. I thought about the question, really thought about it, the way it deserved to be thought about, not with the reflexive reassurance that social politeness trains us toward, but with the genuine interior inquiry of a person taking their own temperature honestly. Was I happy? I thought about my classroom and Marcus and the essays that made me sit up straight. About Biscuit asleep under the kitchen table. About running Shelby Bottoms at 6 a.m. with Denise, talking at each other in the particular shorthand of a friendship that has been through something real together. About my mother in her garden and the Leland Lane kitchen table that had witnessed everything. About Noah's song, distance and return, the space between people who love each other and what crosses it, and the way a 14-year-old had put into imperfect chords what I had been trying to understand for 3 years. About Thursday evenings. About a hand taken in a folding chair at a guitar recital on Nolansville Road. About forgiveness. About air. About the woman I had become in the years of being alone. The running medals, the piano, the graduate course, the steel my mother had said was always there. About how that woman had not been diminished by forgiveness, but had made it possible, had been strong enough to choose it, to carry it toward James not as a surrender, but as an offering, freely, deliberately, on her own terms. About the fact that the life I had now, flawed and complicated and still in progress and entirely, defiantly real, was one I had built. Not had. Built. with my own hands and the right people beside me and the willingness to keep going on the days when going felt like the hardest possible thing. Was I happy? Yes, I said. Simple. Certain. The truest word I had. James was quiet for a moment. Then he reached over and took my hand. The same way he had in the folding chair. The same unhurried, familiar certainty of a hand that knows where it belongs. Me too, he said. We walked the rest of the greenway like that, hand in hand in the March evening, the river silver beside us, the Nashville sky going from gold to purple to the deep, generous blue of a southern night coming on, and I thought about all the roads that had led here, the ones that had seemed like detours, the ones that had seemed, at certain junctures, like they were leading nowhere survivable. They had all led here, to this path, this hand, this evening, to the woman I had needed to become before I could choose this freely rather than needing it desperately, to a love that had been broken completely and rebuilt honestly, and was therefore, in the specific, structural way of things that have been tested and held, stronger at every point where it had once given way. If this story stayed with you, if it reminded you of your own road, your own forgiveness, your own rebuilding, we would love to hear from you. Leave a comment below. Tell us where you are in your story. This community reads every single one, and your words matter more than you know. There is a thing that Reverend Sims said, the full version of what I had heard that Sunday, the sentence that followed the one about the door and the air. I did not hear it the first time because I was still too far inside my own grief to receive it fully. I heard it later, months later, in a different Sunday, sitting in the same pew at 15th Avenue Baptist on a morning when the October light came through the old windows and long, honey-colored bars, and the choir was doing something quietly magnificent, and the whole morning had the quality of a thing that knew its own worth. Reverend Sims said, "The bravest thing a person can do is not the leaving. Anyone can leave. The bravest thing, the thing that takes everything you have, is the staying. The choosing, again and again, with full knowledge, to remain, to repair, to find out what's left when the fire's done, and decide it's worth the building." I sat in that pew with the honey light on my hands, and I thought, yes, that is exactly it. That is the whole entire thing. Caroline Adler did not survive James Marsh's betrayal because she was unbreakable. She survived because she chose, every single day, to keep building her own life, her own strength, her own understanding of what forgiveness actually means. And when James finally found his way back, not with grand gestures or perfect words, but with the simple, costly offering of the true thing, she was strong enough to receive it on her own terms. Their love did not return to what it was. It became what it was always supposed to be, honest, tested, chosen, not despite the breaking. Because of it, one marriage, one betrayal, one long road back to something real. And at the end of it, not in spite of everything, but through everything, two people standing on a Nashville greenway in the March evening light, hand in hand, choosing each other again. Thank you so much for watching my story all the way to the end. Your support means everything. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts.